The Bermuda Triangle has captured imaginations with stories of vanished planes and ships, but now a new scientific theory claims to finally have the answer. 700 meters below, there was complete darkness. The light from the ROV camera could only reach a few feet ahead, and the people sitting in the control room were staring at the screen without blinking. The team had gone there to search for the wreckage of an old ship, maybe to find gold, silver, or some lost piece of history hidden under the sea. But what appeared changed the entire mission. In front of the camera, huge stone blocks could be seen resting on the ocean floor. Their edges looked straight, the surfaces appeared flat, and they seemed arranged in a way that looked carefully placed by someone. The strangest part was that this wasn't a rumor or a blurry image. It was HD footage supported by sonar data and recorded during a real survey mission working under a government contract. For a few seconds, complete silence filled the control room as if everyone realized that something below was not normal. The team had gone looking for a ship, but what they saw changed everything. But the real question was not what was found down there. The real question was how it got there. Before we understand that in detail, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can watch videos like this before anyone else. Now, let's take the story a little further back, because the place where all of this was found creates a completely different image in people's minds the moment they hear its name. The Bermuda Triangle. This region is believed to be a part of the Atlantic Ocean stretching between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, covering an area of around 500,000 square miles. For years, all kinds of stories have surrounded this place. Some say ships disappear here without leaving any trace. Others say airplanes suddenly vanish from radar. And some connect it to a mysterious force that no one has been able to explain even today. That's why whenever people hear the name Bermuda Triangle, thoughts of ghosts, aliens, time portals, and strange events immediately come to mind. But here's one important thing to understand. The story we're talking about right now is not like those old rumors or scary stories made for the internet. This is not about something a sailor claimed to see. This is about a recorded survey mission. A mission that involved a professional team, a government contract, modern equipment, and everything being documented with real data. Their goal was not to search for mysteries. They had gone to explore old Spanish shipwrecks and possible treasure beneath the ocean. Which means in the beginning, nobody expected that they would find anything extraordinary. Launch of the 2001 expedition. The year was 2001. In the beginning, nobody had any idea that this mission would later become one of the most talked about stories connected to the Bermuda Triangle. At that time, no one was focused on a lost civilization or a mystery hidden beneath the ocean. The mission had a very simple and clear goal: to find the wreckage of old Spanish ships. Ships that were believed to have sunk centuries ago carrying gold, silver, and valuable treasures down into the sea. The mission was being led by Paulina Zalitsky and her company, Advanced Digital Communications. This was not some amateur exploration team. These people had years of experience in underwater surveys, mapping, and deep-sea exploration. The expedition was also backed by an official contract from the Cuban government, which means this was not a documentary shoot or some internet experiment. Everything was being done in a professional way. They had a research vessel, advanced survey systems, and most importantly, high-level side-scan sonar technology to scan the ocean floor. The plan was very simple. Go to the selected area, record data from the seabed, and check whether there were any signs of old shipwrecks. The first several days were completely normal. The screens showed exactly what missions like this usually show: uneven seafloor, mud, rocks, and sometimes small natural patterns. For the team, this was routine work, spending hours watching monitors, saving data, and moving forward. Nobody was in a hurry because patience is the biggest tool in missions like these. Days passed. A few scans showed slightly interesting readings in some areas, but nothing that could change the entire mission. The atmosphere on the ship stayed calm. People kept checking their systems, writing reports, and hoping that maybe the next area would reveal an old shipwreck. Then, one day, everything changed. Suddenly, something appeared on the sonar screen that nobody had expected. At first, it seemed like it might just be a normal rock formation. But after a few seconds, the team realized the pattern looked strange. There were no random scattered marks. There were lines. The spacing looked almost equal. The shapes did not appear natural. The operator looked at the screen again. The direction of the ship was adjusted slightly. Another scan was run. But the same thing appeared again, and that was the moment the atmosphere changed. A mission that just minutes earlier had been searching for gold and silver had now shifted all of its attention toward that unknown shape appearing on the ocean floor. Then, one scan stopped everything. But before understanding what the team saw next, it's important to understand how they were seeing it in the first place. They were not using a normal camera taking pictures underwater. At that depth, a camera alone doesn't do much. What they were using was side-scan sonar. To understand it in simple words, side-scan sonar is a way to see what is under the ocean. It sends sound waves through the water and then reads the waves that bounce back to create an image-like view of the seafloor. Where the surface is soft, like mud or loose sediment, the sound gets absorbed more, and that area appears darker on the screen. On the other hand, where the surface is hard, like rock, the sound reflects more strongly, and that area appears brighter. Normal geological formations under the ocean usually look very irregular. Some places are higher, some lower, some shapes are broken, and some patterns are rounded. People who have worked with this data for years can usually tell within minutes what looks natural and what seems unusual, and that's exactly why what appeared on the screen that day caught everyone's attention. At first, a few bright areas appeared on the display. Nobody paid much attention in the beginning. But then, someone noticed that the shapes didn't look normal. There were lines, and those lines looked almost parallel to each other. Even the spacing seemed strangely equal. Then, after looking more carefully, they noticed some corners that looked almost like right angles. At that point, the professional team became fully active. The sonar technician immediately assumed it might be a system error. He adjusted the angle of the ship and ran another scan. The same result appeared. Then, he changed the gain settings to remove the effect of weak or overly strong signals. Still, the same result. Next, he changed the frequency to get a different depth response. Nothing changed. Until now, the team still believed the sonar screen might be showing some kind of mistake. But then, they noticed something that changed the entire atmosphere: shadows. At first glance, it might not sound important, but for people who have spent years reading seafloor data, shadows are one of the strongest clues. Because in sonar, shadows do not appear randomly. When sound waves hit an object and cannot reach the area behind it, a dark section appears on the screen. That means something is standing above the surrounding surface. If the ground is completely flat, shadows do not form. If something is buried under the sediment, shadows do not form. And if it is only a thin rock layer, you usually don't see that effect either. The team looked back at the screen. Now they started realizing that those shapes were not just bright marks. Clear shadows were forming behind them. That meant something elevated existed down there. Something that had shape, edges, and stood above the seafloor. At that moment, the expressions in the control room began to change. The sonar technician immediately thought maybe it was just an illusion caused by the angle. The ship's direction was adjusted again. Another scan was done over the same location. The same thing appeared again. Now the situation started to feel more serious. the team decided they would not reach any conclusion from a single observation. They made a second pass over the area, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth, every time from a different direction at a different speed, and with changed scan settings, but all 5 scans gave the same result. Everywhere they scanned, the same pattern appeared. The same straight shapes, the same spacing, the same shadows. At this point, it became difficult to blame the machine because if the system had been faulty, the data would have changed each time. But here, the same thing kept appearing again and again. After that, the team opened their databases. First, they compared it with old shipwreck patterns. No match. Then they checked coral structures. Nothing looked similar. Then they compared it with known marine geological formations. Still no answer. Slowly, one thing started becoming clear. Whatever was appearing below had never been recorded in that area before. It did not look like any known shipwreck, any coral pattern, or any normal geological formation. ROV mission, descending into the darkness. Now the decision had been made. The sonar kept giving the same readings again and again, and the team understood that they could no longer move forward by looking only at data. If something was really down there, they had to see it with their own eyes. So they took the next step, sending an ROV down to a depth of 700 meters. Everyone on the ship knew at that moment that this mission was no longer a normal survey. Going 700 meters below the surface sounds simple when you hear it. But the ocean is a different world. At that depth, pressure becomes more than 70 atmospheres. No human can go there directly. And if a machine fails down below, there is often no way to recover it. If the cable breaks, the camera shuts down, or a seal fails, the ROV stays on the ocean floor forever. There is no second chance down there. That's why the team prepared very carefully. First, the main cable of the ROV was fully checked. Every connection was inspected. Then the power system was tested. The control system was checked, and every emergency setting was run again. Nobody was ready to take risks because by now they had started feeling that something unusual might be waiting below. After that, it was time for the floodlights. At 700 meters deep, sunlight does not reach. Natural light had not touched that place for thousands, maybe millions of years. The ROV's lights were going to become their eyes. So, every light was tested again and again. Then, the cameras were calibrated. Angles were adjusted. The live feed was checked. The recording system was reviewed one more time. When everything was ready, the command came from the control room. Lower the ROV. Slowly, the cable started unrolling. For the first few meters, everything looked normal. There was still a little light in the water. Small fish passed in front of the camera. The screen looked calm and peaceful. But as the ROV moved deeper, the light began to disappear. The world above slowly faded away. After some time, the water became completely dark. Now, only the ROV's floodlights could be seen on the screen. Their white beams were cutting through the darkness and moving forward. At a depth of 300 meters, the control room had become completely silent. Nobody was speaking. Everyone was just staring at the screen. The machine kept descending. Now, there was nothing outside except darkness. Tiny particles floated in front of the camera. It felt like slowly entering an empty world. The cable went deeper. And then, for the first time, something started appearing at the edge of the floodlights. At first, it seemed like it was just the ocean floor. But, within the next few seconds, they realized this did not look like a normal seabed. It looked like something that should not have been there. First visual confirmation, 680 meters, 690 meters, and finally, the ROV reached close to the ocean floor. Everyone sitting in the control room was watching the screen continuously. Until now, everyone expected to see a normal underwater surface, mud, scattered rocks, and uneven ground. But the moment the floodlights reached farther ahead, what appeared on the screen made the entire room fall completely silent for a few seconds. First, a large flat surface appeared. Then, another one beside it. Then, a third. At first, it seemed like these were just normal rocks. But within a few seconds, everyone started feeling that something was different. These surfaces did not look broken and irregular like normal underwater rock formations. The ROV moved a little farther. Now, the edges became clearer. Straight edges, sharp corners. Corners that almost looked cut. Under the sea, things usually appear rounded, worn down, and uneven. But here, the shapes looked strangely organized. The camera moved closer. Now, it became clear that these were not separate stones. There appeared to be huge rectangular block-like structures. Some looked arranged in a line. Some had almost equal spacing between them. And the farther the camera moved, the stronger the feeling became that this was not a random ocean floor. Then, the team started studying the surfaces carefully. and another strange detail appeared. The surfaces of the blocks looked surprisingly smooth. There were very few signs of normal ocean erosion. There wasn't heavy mud covering them, no thick layer of sediment, and it didn't look like these structures had been completely buried for a long time. The ROV moved slightly lower, and now the scale started becoming clear. These were not small rocks. Some of the blocks looked so massive that the ROV itself appeared tiny in comparison. Their edges were visible, and the surfaces could be clearly separated from each other. It looked as if someone had placed huge pieces below in some kind of arrangement. The people sitting in the control room were not the same anymore. Just a few minutes earlier, there had been conversation, but now the room had become almost silent. Only the sound of machines could be heard. Everyone was looking at the screen, but nobody was speaking. The sonar technician sat completely still in his chair. One hand was still resting on the control panel, but it wasn't moving. The expression on his face looked like he himself could not decide how to understand what he was seeing. One crew member moved closer to the screen. Another was gripping the edge of the console so tightly that his fingertips had turned pale. Nobody reached any conclusion. Nobody said this was a city or a lost civilization, but every face carried the same question. The ROV kept moving slowly forward. The floodlights continued cutting through the darkness, and on the screen, more and more similar blocks kept appearing, some in lines, some at equal distances, some so organized that anyone looking at them for a moment might think, now. The question was no longer whether something existed down there. The real question was, could nature create something like this? Because many times under the sea, things are discovered that at first look man-made but later turn out to be completely natural. So, the team decided that now every possibility would be checked one by one. First, they looked at ocean currents. The ocean is never truly still. Water is always moving below the surface. Currents flowing for millions of years can wear down rocks, break them apart, and create strange shapes. Sometimes the seafloor develops patterns that from above can look like roads or walls, but this is where the first problem appeared. Ocean currents do not organize things. They scatter them. When something breaks underwater, the pieces usually spread in different directions. But what was appearing on the screen looked completely different. Straight lines, equal spacing, and repeating patterns. Then the team looked at the second possibility, volcanic activity. Because in many parts of the world, cooled lava can create strange formations. In some places, rocks appear so organized that from a distance they can look like walls built by humans. But when the team studied the ROV footage more carefully, this theory also did not fit completely. Surfaces formed by volcanic activity usually show more breakage. Their edges are often irregular, but here some of the blocks appeared to have very clean edges. Some sections looked so straight that people started asking the question, could nature alone really create something like this? After that, a third possibility came forward. Tectonic forces. In other words, the movement of Earth's plates. Sometimes huge sections of land crack under pressure and create formations that can appear organized. This theory seemed stronger than the others, but even here, there was a problem. Tectonic forces can break land apart, but they do not arrange it into lines. They can create pressure, but they do not usually create equal spacing. So, the team pulled out the geological records for the area. The seafloor around western Cuba is generally believed to be made mostly of limestone. Limestone is a softer type of rock that gradually wears down over time. In deep ocean conditions, its surfaces usually begin to break apart and erosion becomes clearly visible. But the ROV footage seemed to be telling a different story. So, what was causing this? The team kept reviewing the data again and again. Every theory answered some questions, but left others unanswered. Up to this point, after everything we had seen, the unusual structure, its shape, its location, and all the questions connected to it, the most important next step was to hear what the experts thought. And this is where one of the most surprising parts appears. No major expert directly said, yes, this structure was built by an ancient civilization. But nobody clearly said, no, this is completely normal, either. Instead of becoming clearer, the mystery became even deeper. First, let's talk about Manuel Iturralde Vinent. He is considered a researcher who understands marine structures, geology, and natural changes very closely. When he looked at these kinds of claims and images, his approach was very careful. He did not jump to any dramatic conclusion. His point was that underwater environments can sometimes create formations that appear man-made, but are actually the result of natural processes. But at the same time, another thing became clear. The available data was also not strong enough to immediately say that the case was completely natural. Now, let's move to Greg Little. His view was slightly different. He argued against making quick decisions in cases like this. According to him, if a place repeatedly shows patterns, shapes, or signals that do not look normal, they should not simply be ignored just because they do not match our existing understanding. Greg Little raised one important point: investigation. His view was that any unusual discovery should not be dismissed immediately as a joke or imagination. If the question is big, then the investigation should also be big. Better scanning, more surveys, more teams working on it. Only then can we get closer to understanding what the truth really is. And this is where the biggest question starts to appear. If someday in the future it were proven that this structure was truly not natural, then what would that actually mean? That would not simply mean that something old had been discovered. It would mean we might have to rethink when civilizations actually began. Could humans have been doing something long before the history we currently know? Was there something that disappeared over time and got lost? Or is it possible that even today, we still understand very little about the world hidden beneath the ocean? Opposing theory. The question comes up: what if all of this is not actually as mysterious as it looks? What if what we are seeing as an ancient structure or a hidden secret is really just nature doing its work? The first explanation people bring up is geological jointing. It sounds a little complicated, but in simple words, inside the Earth, pressure, temperature, water, and movement of rocks continue for thousands and millions of years. Sometimes, because of all these forces, cracks begin forming inside rocks in certain patterns. And slowly, those patterns create shapes that can look like something built by humans. The biggest examples of this can be seen in different parts of the world, where natural rock formations appear so straight and evenly shaped that at first glance it feels like someone cut and arranged them. But later it turns out they were completely natural. So, skeptics say, maybe the same thing happened here, too. Then comes the natural block formation theory. This means that under the ocean or underground, large rocks can sometimes break apart and settle in ways that make them look like blocks or walls. Now, if you see them from above or scan them from a limited angle, the human brain naturally starts connecting patterns. And that leads us to the third point: sonar illusion. Now, this is a very interesting idea. When underwater exploration happens, sonar technology is often used. It is not a direct camera. It creates an image using sound waves. But here's the problem: sonar does not always give a perfectly clear picture. Sometimes, because of angle, distance, water conditions, and data processing, shapes appear that are not actually there. Just imagine if a few rocks are lying in a somewhat organized way, and sonar connects those shapes together. Then on the screen, they might look like roads, walls, or buildings. But when researchers go closer and check directly, the story can turn out very differently. And this is where one very important name comes in: Robert Ballard. His approach has always been very straightforward. His view is simple: if a claim is extraordinary, then the evidence should also be extraordinary. Meaning, if someone says a lost civilization has been found under the ocean, then pictures alone are not enough. Strange shapes alone are not enough. More evidence is needed. And this is where the skeptical side becomes strongest. What was missing? First, samples, meaning no rock or material was collected from that location and tested in a laboratory. Second, isotope dating, meaning no scientific testing was done to determine how old the structure actually was. Third, drilling, meaning no deeper investigation was carried out to understand what the layers underneath were showing. And when these three things are missing, science stops there. Because science does not move forward based on imagination. It moves forward through investigation. Time problem and lost civilization theory. Imagine, just for one moment, imagine that whatever was found under the ocean was not natural. Imagine that someone actually built it. Then, the next question appears automatically. If humans built it, then when was it built? Because the biggest problem here is not the structure itself, it's time, and that's exactly what makes this entire story feel so mysterious. The depth being discussed, around 700 meters below the surface, is not ordinary at all. If a place exists that deep today, then the question becomes, was this land ever above water? And if it was, how did it end up down there? This is where the idea of geological sinking comes in. In simple words, the Earth never stays still. For thousands and millions of years, tectonic plates keep moving. Some land rises, some sinks, oceans expand, mountains form. Some people suggest that maybe this area was once closer to sea level and slowly moved downward because of geological changes over time. At first, that sounds possible. But the moment you start calculating the timeline, the story suddenly becomes much more difficult. If a civilization built something but left behind no written records, then how would we know about it today? And if that place later sank beneath the ocean, then its name might never have survived in history at all. This is where people start saying, maybe our story is incomplete. Maybe some chapters have been lost. So now the final question is for you. What do you think? Was this simply geology? Or could it be a lost chapter of history? And if you enjoy videos about mysteries, research, and hidden history like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now so every new video reaches you first.